This body is just a host. I am that parasite. That is what must survive.
In the last video, I discussed the evolution of the Goa'uld. Trill symbiont. While doing research on that topic, it led to some really damning conclusions. Let's just get into it. We know trills were spacefaring and interacting with other species by the early 23rd century. The joining of a symbiont and a trill had occurred as early as the 12th century. Trill of all types were traveling to Vulcan, to Kronos, and even Earth by the 2240s. There was even a trill serving aboard a Federation vessel, the USS Cabot, in the 2250s. The species was known to be extremely charismatic, and due to this, many would become quite accomplished ambassadors. But all this betrays one simple fact. As open and as loving as the Trill appear to be, the evidence points to a very manipulative government that lies to the Federation and to its own populace. We also see evidence that the symbionts may be overtaking their hosts and changing internal Trill politics to suit their needs. As stated, looking at the Trill government, we know that they kept a deep secret from the Federation for near an entire century. At first blush, this may not seem like much, but when you break it down, it's actually quite complex. The secret was of the joining process of the symbionts to the Trill themselves. And really think about this. When applying for membership in the Federation, Starfleet takes an in-depth, serious review of the prospective member. We know that they ensure that the society is ready, that the planet meets certain criteria, and the government is able to sustain peace within the Federation itself. Once admitted into the Homo sapien only club, member worlds are given access to all of the technologies available that the Federation has to offer. So the steps that the Trill would have had to take, the hoops they would have had to jump through to hide that they implant organisms into themselves that are known to take over the original host and change them, is astronomical. But it goes even further than that. Again, we have to remember that the Trill worked as ambassadors and Starfleet officers. So how exactly, for a century, would the Trill be able to bypass in-depth medical exams? One would assume that these are required. These tests would have most likely seen the symbiont. It's not exactly something that's really small. Did the Trill have a rule about Starfleet officers not being joined? So did Trill have to be unjoined to be in Starfleet? That wouldn't seem to be accurate, as we know that Dax had some kind of interaction with the crew of the USS Enterprise. No bloody A, B, C, or D. And even if there were no joined Trills in Starfleet, what about the ambassadors? Starfleet doesn't check out its own ambassadors? Really? With known Romulan infiltrators, they don't do in-depth analysis of every ambassador. Seriously. So either the Trill negotiated some stupid agreements where doctors never looked at joined Trills, or Starfleet Medical is so corrupt that the Trill can buy them off. Either way, no red flags, of which this is one, are ever looked at. Starfleet just apparently takes it in stride. I guess this means I'll have to make another video on how Section 31 ensured Trill would be a part of the Federation. I mean, I just got content for days, my lads. And that's not even to consider why the Trill and symbionts want to hide all of this. That's bizarre. Unless there's another motive. It's also so weird how everyone around the Trill seemed to instantly trust them, especially after the lie is exposed. On that note, let's look at the internal workings of Trill society. We don't know a lot about the Trill government, but we do know that the Trill Science Ministry holds a lot of power. They would require strict rules and regulations for those who should be joined, having 300 symbionts for only 1,000 applicants or so every year. Interestingly, it was thought that only 1 Trill in 1,000 was compatible with symbionts, which would mean that, there would need to be like 300,000 applicants to find the right 300, yet the ministry somehow made do with only 1,000 applicants. Maybe they claimed they had already weeded out them beforehand, and so there were hundreds of thousands of applicants originally that they never mentioned, but either way, this is another seeming red flag, and it's never caught. Which is too bad, because the red flag did hold a deep secret. Nearly half of the population of Trill are able to have symbionts. This was a deeply held secret by the Ministry because it was thought that the Trill would begin fighting over the symbionts themselves. It was believed that near pandemonium would occur and a breakdown of the social graces of society would be seen, which, again, the Trill always presented themselves as charismatic, loving, and open people. Yet, if the populace found out that half of them could take these symbionts, it would melt the fabric of society itself. I guess Trill's society is full of nothing but hypocritical liars. Or maybe the symbionts are keeping it secret so that they can pick and choose who can be a part of their club, and it makes it easier to take over. I mean, all of this does have a simple explanation. What if it's all being orchestrated by the symbionts themselves? Think about it. We know that once joined, and after about only a few scant days, the separation of the two will kill the host for sure, and only kill the symbiont if there isn't another symbiont available.
This body is just a host. I am that parasite. That is what must survive.
The symbiont. It's gone.
Oh, everything went perfectly. The operation was a complete success.
I feel so alone.
Now that woman is bleeding to death in the infirmary.
I'd rather not discuss that, Benjamin.
You have to discuss it, Dax. You know as well as I do we can't let her die.
She's not going to die. She'll live on, in me.
But Jadzia herself will die, and you'll have killed her.
You think I don't know that?
Additionally, while the symbiont and host are claimed to work in tandem, there are instances of the symbiont overriding a weak-willed host's personality, which is just convenient. The symbionts, when they're reintroduced to a new host, don't seem to care much about their former person. They are more than willing to let the other person die. And again, this just makes me wonder, what if the symbionts are running the show? Once joined, the host seems only to care about the symbiont. They seem drugged or enslaved, possibly through some chemical mixture that turns them into, I don't know, effective automatons. So there would be no way to know what the symbionts are doing to them once joined. Not only that, ultimately the Trill deify the symbionts. Those who take care of the symbionts are considered to be religious leaders. The symbionts are everything to their society, and it makes little sense why. In the end, literally these slugs were more important than the individual hosts. And it would be so easy for the symbionts to work together to manipulate the Trill and effectively take them over. Given how much prestige and power is given to a symbiont and how much power a joined Trill has, they could be running the entirety of the organization. The symbionts could be orchestrating all of the inner workings of the ministry, which could then be impacting the government. That's assuming joined Trills haven't infested the government itself. This would explain why there was always a push to keep it secret, just in case anyone found out they were manipulating the hosts. It could also ensure that they stayed in power if no one else knew. It also explains why Dax was considered an outlier in her love of sex, because most people who had symbionts didn't like sex. Most symbionts hated it. It's really weird. It's a shame we don't have a lot of information on Trill's society, because the more we know, the more we could understand. But just at first blush, looking at the vague information we have, it does appear that the symbionts are running the show, possibly as malevolent dictators. But these are all the things I found out, and some of them are my opinions. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to rate, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you on the next Lore Reloaded.